Hey, how's it going and welcome to another Jojo June video. So this is a video I actually wanted to do for the previous Jojo June, which was 2 years ago at this point. And it is of course a review slash discussion, I guess, about Hirohiko Araki's book, Manga in Theory and Practice, The Craft of Creating Manga. And I bought this book obviously not because I have any ambitions about being a manga author, but mostly just because I find Hirohiko Araki to be such an interesting dude. I feel like he's kind of this paradox of a being where we have a really good sort of understanding of what the man is like, his hobbies, his musical tastes. And he's also just pretty open about, the way he writes things and why he wrote things certain ways. There's all sorts of little nuggets of wisdom you can find scattered about through different interviews and, especially in the Jojoniums, which are the hardcover Jojo the manga reprints. In every one, he has this little interview where he talks a bit about, he just talks about the story, the characters, just different stuff like that. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, I feel like people also have just a horrible misunderstanding of, other things about the man. You see this a lot, especially with, the Araki Forgot crowd, where it seems like they have this mission in their minds to, prove that Araki is just incompetent or something. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that it kind of feels as if Araki the person and Araki the creator in people's minds are almost like two entirely separate entities. And so I got this book mostly because I was very interested in learning about his perspective on writing and just the art of creating manga, as the book suggests. And although the book is written with the idea of, being a guide for making manga in mind, even Araki himself says it's pretty unlikely that, most people reading this book are going to end up being manga authors. But sort of the beauty of it is that he has unintentionally, I guess, written a comprehensive, general, art and creation guide. And he even mentions in the book the idea that manga kind of is this ultimate art form. Because when you stop and think about how much goes into creating a manga, it's kind of insane. You have to do the art, you have to do characters, story, writing, plot, setting. It's just it's the kind of thing to where you stop and you think about a video game, for example. How many multitudes of people are used to make video games? You'll have your writers, and you'll have artists, and you'll have modelers. And even when you compare it to, Western comics, it's pretty much never just one guy doing it all. You'll have the guy who writes the comic, and then the guy who does the line work, and then somebody who colors it. But when it comes to manga, it's sort of a one-man show. Obviously they have assistants and stuff, but a lot of the time the assistants more seem to just do kind of the busy work, I guess, of go ahead and ink this for me, thank you. Or yes, please, draw me 55 background characters, they don't have to look amazing. Just stuff like that. But otherwise, it's one guy going, okay, I gotta design the characters, I have to come up with the story, the setting, just everything. And obviously there's exceptions, the duo that immediately comes to my mind are Oba and Obata, who are the creators of Death Note. I don't remember which one is which off the top of my head, but one of them would do the story and the other one would do the art. So there are exceptions where there's a team or multiple people at work, but in general, it seems to be it's just a one-man show. But as I was saying a second ago, in creating a book about good ways and, advice for making manga, he's kind of accidentally made, or maybe on purpose, I don't know, but he's made a book that's super comprehensive about multitudes of different art forms. And that's what I think is the real selling point of this, is not the fact that it's a book about making manga, it's a book about making, art, stories, characters, setting. It's a book about making all these different things. So let's say, for example, you're a writer, you're writing a story. You can find good advice in this book. Let's just say you're just an artist or a character designer. Good advice to be found in here. So I'm just gonna kind of flip through the book and talk about certain things that I find of particular note. And I would say this is the major sort of thing of the book, is the 4 major fundamentals of manga structure. These are 4 things that I would say are pretty universally important for pretty much any kind of medium you can imagine, whether it's a movie, a video game, an anime, a manga, a comic. And it's characters, story, setting, and themes. And there's this one quote in the book that I so wholeheartedly agree with. It goes, "Of the 4 fundamentals, characters are supreme. If you have effective characters in place, you will be undefeatable. And this is something that I wholeheartedly agree with. Like, more often than pretty much anything, I would say the one thing that hooks me into something is the characters. Because to me, like, everything else is kind of dependent on the characters. Like, when's the last time you heard somebody describe something as, it has a really good story, but the characters suck? Like, I feel like that never really happens, right? Whereas I feel like it's a lot more common to hear something along the lines of, man, I really like these characters, but that story wasn't that great. And that also goes for settings. Like, you could have the most interesting setting in the world, but if there's nobody in there who's interesting and who play off of that setting, then it's kind of like, it's just a plot of land. It's like, characters are success. If you make a character that people like, then you win. You know, once you get people to set their profile pictures on Discord or whatever to, like, your character, then it's over. You win. And then when it comes to story, Araki writes this. When I described the 4 major fundamentals of manga structure, I wrote, "It is possible for a manga to succeed based on characters or setting alone. But I can't think of a manga that stands on nothing but its story." And I also kind of feel the same way. Like, I'm really struggling to think of something, and I've played a lot of games and seen a lot of different anime, and I'm trying to think of something that made me go like, man, that story was so good, but the setting, characters, and themes are bad. But yeah, I don't know, it's interesting to think about, like, just how dependent on characters, setting, and themes stories are. Because stories really are just characters doing things at the end of the day. In the settings section, he brings up this one point that I really like and that I agree with a lot, and it's, if you create a world haphazardly, the readers won't achieve immersion and will likely lose interest in reading your manga. And at least for me, this is more of a kind of general thing, but I find that one thing that always really drives me insane is when stories kind of break their own rules. Like, I think a game or an anime or whatever starts to lose me whenever something really dumb happens and it takes me out of the experience and I just start thinking, okay, several people probably saw this and thought, yes, fine. This is okay. Just like characters acting out of character for the benefit of the plot moving forward, just like stuff like that. But that's just something to be very careful of in general, is the avoiding the, wait, that doesn't make sense moment. But yeah, setting is super important, and I feel like a lot of people don't understand the sort of the importance of having a good setting. Like, just for me personally, I find kind of in order of the things that he talks about, characters for me are number 1. Then probably I would say setting, then themes, then story. That's just a personal, like, that's just my own order of things, but, you know, characters I already mentioned, if you have good characters, you win. Like, it's over. And I find most of my favorite things have a setting that I'm just really into, like Majora's Mask, Fallout New Vegas, Dragon Ball, Monster Hunter. But again, the two often work hand in hand. Like, I find it's kind of hard to have super amazing, interesting setting, and then, like, characters that are kind of just boring. Like, a lot of the Souls games, for example, come to mind for that, because those places are largely pretty empty. In terms of, like, NPCs, there's obviously a lot of enemies and stuff, but see, I'm in a bad mood, because I'm trying to have my fucking book club, and there's people outside doing construction, making a lot of noise when I'm trying to read a book. And of course he talks a lot about art throughout the book. But he brings up this point in the art section, where I can't find exactly what the quote was, but he basically says something along the lines of, like, to really stand out, you have to make your art unique. And this is something I agree with 5,000%. Like, for any artists who happen to be watching, I think the number 1 key to success and recognition when it comes to art is to make your art recognizable. I think you've, like, achieved victory when it comes to art, when people look at your art and immediately know, oh, that's such and such's style. Like, everybody knows that Jojo, like, the art style of Jojo, that is Araki's style. You know, Akira Toriyama, like, Dragon Ball, that's his style. And so I feel like that really is the secret to success when it comes to art, is if somebody can look at something you've made and within 0.5 seconds immediately recognize that's from you, then you're golden. So yeah, manga in theory and practice, I highly recommend it for anybody who's a fan of JoJo. It's a really great sort of guidebook for figuring out, like, how Araki designs characters, stories, his art, just like why he does things a certain way. And it gives you a deeper appreciation for all the work and thought that goes into manga. Like, manga is one of the most brutal fucking crafts on the planet. Especially when you have, like, week deadlines where every week you have to put out a new chapter. So it's really no surprise so many manga authors end up just, like, in horrible, agonizing condition. Most authors will make their one series and then they're out, you know? But Araki seems to be in pretty good health, which is obviously great. But it's also really good for anybody who's a writer, an artist, character designer, just anything like that. Any artistic pursuit, really. And it's also pretty short. It's only about 200 pages, so you can read it within, like, you know, about a day if you read pretty quick like I do. So yeah, good book. Really glad this is in English in general. I feel like it's pretty uncommon for, you know, books written by Japanese manga artists to get translated into English like this. Also, I would fucking absolutely kill to have an autobiography written by Araki. That would be amazing. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.